Elena stood at the precipice where two worlds met. Behind her lay the familiar valley of her childhood, where every path led back to others' expectations. Before her stretched an endless horizon of possibility, terrifying in its vastness. The backpack on her shoulders felt heavier than ever, filled not with supplies but with the carefully packed hopes of everyone who had ever loved her. Her parents' dreams for her future, her teachers' ambitions, her friends' assumptions about who she should become, all pressed down like stones against her spine. The letter trembled slightly in grandfather's weathered hands as he read aloud the words that would fracture their perfect dinner table. Elena watched his face transform from curiosity to disappointment, then to something harder. Around the mahogany table, 3 generations waited in silence, their formal attire and polished silverware creating an atmosphere of judgment rather than family. The chandelier cast harsh shadows across their faces, making them appear like figures from another century. This was not the conversation she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her mind. The pen felt foreign in her grip, like holding her own fate. Each signature she had already written represented a piece of herself she was choosing to abandon. The contract for the law firm her father had arranged lay before her, its elegant script demanding her soul in exchange for security. Outside the window, rain washed away the last traces of the world she was leaving behind. Her law degree stared back at her from its frame on the wall, a testament to years of compliance that now felt like a beautiful prison sentence she was finally brave enough to break. Each step echoed against the cobblestones like a heartbeat counting down to freedom. The suitcase in her hand contained everything she owned, everything she had chosen to keep when she walked away from the life others had mapped out for her. Dawn painted the medieval spires of her hometown in shades of gold and rose, making them look like something from a fairy tale she had finally grown too old to believe in. Behind her, familiar faces would soon wake to disappointment, their carefully constructed dreams crumbling like sandcastles at high tide. The phone screen lit up her face in harsh blue flashes, each missed call from home another weight added to her already burdened shoulders. Around her, the city pulsed with purpose, thousands of strangers moving through their carefully planned days while she sat frozen on a bench that had become her temporary throne of uncertainty. The job applications scattered beside her bore witness to her attempts to build something new from the ashes of her old life. Pigeons gathered at her feet, their presence both comforting and mocking. The suit hung on her frame like borrowed skin, each thread a reminder of the person she was pretending to become. In the mirror's reflection, she saw a stranger wearing her face, someone who smiled with her mouth but whose eyes belonged to a different story entirely. The cramped apartment behind her served as both sanctuary and prison, its bare walls echoing with the silence of a life lived in half-truths. Each morning she practiced introductions to people who would never know her real name, her real dreams, her real fears. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like mechanical insects, their artificial buzz drowning out any remaining spark of individuality that might have survived her first week in the corporate maze. Around her, faces moved past in a blur of professional politeness and empty efficiency, each person a carbon copy of the next. The stack of files in her arms grew heavier with each passing hour, not from their physical weight but from the knowledge that she was becoming exactly what she had sworn never to become. Through the glass partitions, she could see real sunlight touching real trees. The cursor blinked at her like a patient heartbeat, waiting for the words that would finally set her free. Around her desk, the remnants of another sleepless night told the story of her slow suffocation. Empty coffee cups stood like monuments to caffeine-fueled desperation, while crumpled papers bore witness to a dozen abandoned attempts to make this place feel like home. The plant on her desk had begun to droop, its leaves turning brown at the edges like her own spirit was doing. Outside the dark windows, the city slept while she made the most important decision of her adult life. The wooden bench felt harder than she remembered, though perhaps that was just the weight of her family's confusion pressing down from the front row. The graduation robes hung heavy on her shoulders, not with honor but with the burden of expectations she was about to shatter. The judge's gavel waited patiently on his desk, ready to make official what she had already decided in her heart. Each family member sat with the same expression of bewildered pride, unable to understand that sometimes the greatest act of love is choosing your own truth over their comfortable lies. The robes felt lighter in her arms than they ever had on her shoulders, like shedding a second skin that had been slowly killing her from the inside. Each step away from the courthouse echoed with finality, her footsteps marking the boundary between who she had been and who she was finally brave enough to become. The daylight seemed brighter than before, as if the world itself was celebrating her decision to choose truth over comfort. Behind her, the courthouse stood like a monument to all the paths she would never walk, while before her stretched miles of unpaved road. The journal pages fluttered softly as she wrote, each word a small act of rebellion against the silence she had kept for so long. Around her, the café buzzed with the gentle chaos of real life, people pursuing dreams that belonged entirely to themselves. The steam from her tea curled upward like prayers to a god she was finally learning to worship. For the first time in months, her handwriting looked like her own, not the careful script of someone trying to please everyone else. The words flowed from her pen like water finding its natural course. The wind carried her laughter across the valley like a song she had forgotten she knew how to sing. Below her feet, the world spread out in all its magnificent chaos, each mountain and valley representing a choice she was finally free to make. The backpack on her shoulders now felt light with possibility rather than heavy with expectation. The sunrise painted the sky in colors that had no names, like her future was too bright and beautiful to be contained by other people's definitions of success. For the first time, she understood what it meant to breathe. The chalk dust settled on her fingers like the residue of magic, each lesson leaving its mark on both teacher and student. Around her, young faces glowed with the kind of curiosity that no standardized test could measure, their questions reaching into territories that mattered. The sunlight streaming through the windows seemed to bless every moment of this life she had chosen, this work that fed her soul even when it couldn't fill her bank account. When she looked into their eager eyes, she saw the future she was helping to create, one honest question at a time. The fire crackled between them like a living thing, its warmth more precious than any heating system in any corporate boardroom she had ever sat in. Around the circle, faces glowed with the kind of honesty that only comes when everyone has already chosen to be real. Their stories wove together like threads in a tapestry, each one different but all sharing the same golden thread of authenticity. The stars above seemed closer here, as if the universe itself approved of the life she had chosen to live. For the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere that mattered. The wildflowers felt right in her hands, their imperfect petals and earth-stained stems more beautiful than any arrangement from the florist her mother would have chosen. Around her, the headstones stood like silent witnesses to lives lived in service to other people's dreams. She spoke to them in whispers, telling them about the life she was building from the ruins of their expectations. The afternoon light filtered through the old oak trees like forgiveness itself, soft and golden and understanding. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear her own laughter echoing back from the path she had chosen. The applause washed over her like warm rain, each clap a small victory for everyone who had ever chosen truth over comfort. The award in her hands felt different from the trophies her parents had displayed on their mantelpiece, heavier with meaning and lighter with joy. Around her, faces glowed with the kind of pride that comes from seeing someone live authentically. The speech she had written sat forgotten on the podium, her words now flowing from a place deeper than preparation. This was success that couldn't be faked, couldn't be borrowed, couldn't be taken away. The painting spoke to her in languages she had learned to understand only after shedding the weight of other people's opinions. Each brushstroke told a story of someone who had chosen to paint their truth rather than copy someone else's vision. Around her, other visitors moved with the same quiet reverence, their faces reflecting the kind of appreciation that comes from recognizing authentic beauty. The gallery felt like a sanctuary for souls who had learned to see beyond surface appearances, beyond the carefully constructed facades that had once trapped her in a life that wasn't her own. The tears came without warning, like spring rain after a long drought of emotional suppression. In the therapist's office, surrounded by the gentle chaos of healing, she finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of everything she had given up and everything she had gained. The box of tissues on the table had become a monument to her willingness to be vulnerable, to show her real face even when it wasn't pretty. Each sob was a small act of rebellion against the part of her that had learned to swallow pain like bitter medicine. the apartment felt like a living thing, each room breathing with the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Around her, the carefully chosen pieces told the story of who she had become when she stopped trying to be who everyone else wanted her to be. The books on the shelves bore the fingerprints of countless hours spent discovering her own mind, while the plants in the windowsill reached towards sunlight like her own spirit had learned to do. The walls were covered with art that spoke to her soul rather than investments that would impress her parents' friends. The screen flickered to life like a portal between two worlds, each one real and important in its own way. Her parents' faces appeared with the same mixture of love and worry that had haunted her dreams for months. Around her apartment, the things that mattered to her sat quietly in the background, unwilling to be hidden or diminished for anyone's comfort. The conversation stretched like a bridge between who she had been and who she had become, each word a small act of courage in service of truth. The ballot felt weighty in her hands, each choice a small vote for the kind of world she wanted to live in rather than the one everyone else expected her to support. Around the sterile polling place, other citizens made their own decisions, each one a tiny act of democracy that added up to something larger than any single voice. The privacy of the booth felt like a sacred space where she could align her civic duty with her personal truth. When she dropped the ballot into the box, it made a sound like hope itself falling into the future. Her hand rose like a small flag of independence, each finger a testament to the voice she had learned to use without apology. Around the community center's folding chairs, faces turned toward her with the kind of attention that comes when someone speaks from genuine conviction rather than political calculation. The words flowed from her mouth like water from a clear spring, each one shaped by years of learning to trust her own judgment. When she finished speaking, the silence that followed felt like respect rather than rejection. The silence spoke louder than any words ever could, each breath a small act of faith in the process of becoming who she was meant to be. Around the circle, other seekers sat with the same quiet determination, their faces reflecting the kind of peace that comes from making choices based on inner wisdom rather than external pressure. The cushions beneath them had become altars to authenticity, each one marking a place where someone had decided to stop running from themselves. In the center of it all, her heart beat with the rhythm of truth. The waves whispered secrets that only those who had learned to listen could hear, their rhythm matching the steady beat of her own heart. Behind her, the footprints in the sand told the story of 1,000 conversations that had ended in the same gentle impasse. The boat grew smaller with each passing moment, carrying with it the last pieces of her old life, the final fragments of who she had been before she learned to choose herself. The sunset painted the sky in shades of acceptance, each color a small victory for the part of her that had learned to love the consequences of her courage. The last light of day clung to the horizon like a promise she was finally brave enough to keep to herself. Around her, the beach stretched empty and infinite, each grain of sand a small reminder that some journeys must be walked alone. The waves continued their ancient dance, their persistence teaching her that authenticity was not a destination but a way of moving through the world. In the distance, she could hear her own footsteps echoing back from all the paths she had chosen not to take, their silence now as beautiful as any applause. The lighthouse stood like a beacon of everything she had learned to trust, its steady beam cutting through the morning mist with the kind of reliability that no human relationship had ever offered her. Each step forward carried her further from the shores of other people's disappointment and deeper into waters she was finally brave enough to navigate alone. The mist swirled around her ankles like the ghosts of all the fears that had once kept her anchored to safe harbors. Behind her, the sun rose with the promise of another day lived according to her own truth. The stone felt warm beneath her fingertips, its surface worn smooth by countless storms that had raged while she was learning to weather her own. From this height, the world spread out below like a map of all the places her courage had taken her and all the territories still waiting to be explored. The wind carried the salt spray of the ocean that had taught her to swim in deeper waters than she had ever imagined possible. Below, the waves crashed against the rocks with the same persistent rhythm that had shaped her into someone who could finally recognize her own voice in the chaos of other people's expectations. The words flowed from her pen like water finding its natural course, each sentence a small victory for the part of her that had learned to trust her own voice. Around her, the ocean stretched toward horizons that no longer frightened her, its vastness now feeling like possibility rather than emptiness. The lighthouse stood behind her like a faithful companion, its beam cutting through whatever fog might try to obscure her path forward. In her journal, the story of her transformation continued to unfold, each page a testament to the courage it takes to choose yourself when everyone you love is asking you to choose them instead.